but I'm very aware that Planning Commission is on the same day. So thanks for the reminder. I appreciate it.
I do have to leave at 5 if we aren't wrapped up by then, but I can stay till at least.
All right, we are live.
Welcome, everybody. This is the City Council Oversight Committee meeting, May 13th, 2021. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This committee meets on the second Thursday of every month at 4 p.m. The Planning Commission also meets on the second Thursday of every month at 6:30. So I just want to remind everyone that we will have a hard stop time. I'd like to welcome Ward 1 Councilmember Studley as the newest member of the Oversight Committee who's joining us today, so welcome. And I'd also like to welcome Mr. Patrick Grace, who's representing OEC today. Happy to have you here as part of our conversation. And I believe we have a staff presentation.
We do. Mrs. Walker will be loading the presentation, and a little bit of background. Long before federal dollars made themselves known and present to all cities, counties, special districts, and tribal governments, indicating funds could be spent to provide municipal broadband throughout rural America, the conversation had already begun here in Norman. And when it started, there were several avenues that this conversation followed. There was discussion of creating municipal broadband that could take the form, excuse me, of a public utility. And this was a brand new thought and path of endeavor for city staff. That is a line of business we are currently not in. We did maintain some degree of understanding and expertise in the world of fiber, as the city has installed a fiber loop that does connect most city facilities. And the loop is to provide us with some redundant backup, because lo and behold, about every other month, a contractor digs up our conduit and breaks it, and we got to go track it down and patch it and get all of our computers back up and running. So that has provided Mr. Tim Powers, our IT director, with his fair share of gray hair. And when staff began to try to put together the scope of the conversation, what does municipal broadband mean? What are the problems we're trying to address? What kind of budget does it take to accomplish these tasks? We were able to reach out to our friends at OEC, who jumped on that task a handful of years ago, put together a budget, and have been actively installing fiber to customers here in Norman and parts greater over the last few years. So we wanted to reach out, touch base with Mr. Patrick Grace, have him come to the table with us and help educate us on what the existing set of circumstances are, so we can identify what areas need to be addressed. We will eventually need to determine, are we going to attempt to compete with Cox Cable, AT&T, and/or OEC in the marketplace? Or is the goal to fill in gaps in service that may exist here in the city limits? I can tell you that Mr. Grace was a wealth of information, and the education city staff has received just here in the last handful of weeks has been very valuable. Our city attorney, Catherine Walker, has gathered the summation of all of our knowledge into a wonderful PowerPoint presentation. Ms. Walker.
Before you start, I'd like to apologize to anybody who's listening in. I failed to mention the fact that the only item on our agenda today is the discussion regarding municipal broadband.
So thank you for that introduction, Daryl. I'll just jump right in. So what is broadband? There's a definition in state law that talks about what it is, and it sort of uses high-speed internet access service and broadband service interchangeably. So those are those services and underlying facilities that provide upstream from customer to provider, or downstream from provider to customer, transmission to or from the internet in excess of 150 kilobits per second, regardless of the technology or medium used. If you look up how fast 150 kilobits is, it's not very fast, but that is how it is defined in state law. The Corporation Commission cannot regulate high-speed internet access service. They do get some notices when a new provider is going to be in the state, and they provide that to the cities, but they do not regulate broadband service. Federal law is a little more helpful. They define it as mass market retail service by wire or radio that provides the capability to transmit data to and receive data from all or substantially all internet endpoints, including capabilities that are incidental to enable the operation of the communication service, excluding dial-up internet access service. This is regulated by the FCC. The FCC is very friendly to broadband and expansion, particularly in rural and underserved areas. And you will see that in some of the efforts that the federal government's currently undertaking to encourage access in those areas. So if you're like me, those speeds don't mean a lot. I want it fast, but I don't know what 25 millibytes per second is. So this is provided by the FCC, and it shows you what you need to accomplish particular tasks. So you can see it has a category for students, 5 to 25 millibytes per second. 25 is really the standard for high-speed internet, for broadband internet as a minimum. So 25 is really what you're looking for to know you have high-speed internet. And I'll go ahead and pull up this map. Every year, at least once a year, I think maybe even more than that, providers are required to provide information to the FCC about where they're serving customers, where they have the capabilities, and at what speed. And you can pull this up. It's called the FCC, I think 477 map on fixed broadband deployment. So you can see Norman. Unfortunately, they pulled the data by county, but I was able to zoom into Norman at least. And you can see the number of providers. So 25 millibytes per second. All of Cleveland County has at least 2 providers that can provide that speed. 3 or more, 96% have 3 or more providers to choose from. If you go to 100 megabytes per second, you have 4.2% of Cleveland County that don't have that option. And as you get faster, of course, that grows all the way up to 1,000 megabytes. That's right, Patrick. Am I saying that right?
Megabits per second.
Megabits.
Yes.
And I was alternating between the two.
Yeah.
So 47.95% do not have 1,000 megabits per second, but 25, that's the speed that the FCC says is enough to be high speed or broadband. And most of Cleveland County has, all of Cleveland County actually has multiple providers to choose from, and most have 3 or more. So there's a lot of options there. And you can see these statistics here a little bit easier than looking at the map based on those downstream and upstream speeds. So I pulled sort of our 3 main providers. We do have multiple providers. Stephen, do you want to go ahead and, or Councilmember Holman, I'm sorry. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question now before I move on? I see the hand raised.
Yes, it was about that map, actually. It looked to me that Ward 7 specifically in the urban area was a little bit lighter shaded. Maybe I'm not seeing it correctly, but it looks lighter to me.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what that might be. That's a lot of university property, and all those light spots look like parking lots to me, or green space, I guess. So
yes,
that seems interesting.
Yeah, some of it is just rights of way and things like that where there is no service. But
okay,
this lighter color here means there's 2 providers you can choose from.
Well, from what I can see, that's the golf course and the Lloyd Noble Center parking lot and the Weather Center and all that stuff. So that's just kind of interesting that I noticed on there. It seemed
Yeah.
in the urban area anyway that we had some gaps.
I know there's, I think Chickasaw Telecom, it serves part of OU, but I couldn't find their information on the map, so that may not be reflected. This is Norman. I just pulled the sort of the top 3 providers that you think of. We do have satellite providers that cover 100% of Norman. So that's an option anywhere in Norman. But our 3 providers that we tend to think of are Cox, AT&T, and OEC. So I pulled these maps, and these are current as of June 2020. So you can see some definite gaps out here in Ward 5, and then some spaces where there's not any service from Cox in sort of in town, I would say. Here's AT&T. They get a lot more out in Ward 5. In town is very well covered. And then OEC, which since June I know has opened up more areas in Norman, I believe. So lots of coverage from those 3 providers. And then again, the 2 satellite providers, a Hughes Network and Viasat Inc. Provide that option across Norman. So there have been efforts to prioritize broadband access both in the state and within the federal government. Oklahoma adopted the Rural Broadband Expansion Act last year, created a 16-member council to study rural broadband access across the state, look at incentives to establish broadband in areas not currently served, and develop their own map similar to the one I just showed you, specific for Oklahoma. Patrick Grace is on that council, so I know he's got a lot of information related to what they're working on. But they are meeting regularly as of last May, I believe, is when it started. And so they have been gathering a lot of information and working through subcommittees to develop some of these things, these initiatives. The FCC has always, for many years, had the Lifeline Program. And this is a requirement of any provider of telecommunication service. They have to provide up to a $9.25 monthly discount to eligible low-income subscribers. You only get one per household, and $9.25 is great for a telephone. It's not great for internet. Internet's a little more expensive. But as of today, the FCC started the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, and that is a much more significant discount, a 50% monthly discount for eligible households. So that's exciting, and that will continue throughout the pandemic and 6 months after the CDC says the pandemic's over. So that's really exciting, and people that want to apply for that, there's information on the FCC website. Really, if you Google the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, you will find the information really easily. But both of those programs are looking at income that's at or below 135% of the federal poverty guidelines, or participation in federal assistance programs like SNAP, Medicaid, things like that. So that's targeted to make it more affordable. The American Rescue Plan, this has been a big week for broadband. The American Rescue Plan came out with the guidelines, the IRS came out with the guidelines on Monday. And so they've got this interim final rule that talks about what you can spend those funds on for broadband. They can be used for investment in broadband in areas that are unserved or underserved. So these are areas that lack a wireline connection that can reliably deliver speeds of 25 megabits per second, download 3, upload. Eligible projects, though, using these funds should be designed for even faster speeds. So if you're going to use this money, you don't want to just do the minimum 25, you have to do 100 megabits per second or greater symmetrical upload and download speeds. And then they really say, if you're going to use the money for this, you've got to prioritize the last mile connections to unserved and underserved households and businesses. And so that really ensures that it can reach households where they don't have that option now. Councilmember Studley, I see your hand is up. Lee, I apologize for calling on council members, but I don't know if you can see them with my screen shared. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, so I was curious, you had mentioned that people could apply for the $50 monthly discount. is that something that they would go to the city website to apply for, or is that like a federal?
It's a federal program, so if you Google emergency broadband benefit, it pulls right up. And there is a link to the application on the FCC's website. And I can send you that after this meeting.
So once a citizen gets approved, do they bring something to, or do they send that to their cable company? How does that work? Or is there more details on the website?
I don't know if they send it to the company or if the FCC will. Patrick, do you know that answer?
The broadband, and good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. The broadband provider has to participate in that program, and and so I believe I saw Cox participating in that program. I'm not sure about AT&T. We're still trying to figure it out as well, but there should be. I think I saw on Cox's website that you can go through. They had some information, and I'll try to find that while we're while this is going on. But it should be connected with the provider.
Okay, thank you.
And this just became effective today, or yesterday rather. So it's very new.
I believe I actually have a email from our government relations person from Cox. I'll see if I can find that real quick and forward it to all of council.
Okay, and I've adjusted my screen so I can see everybody now. So Councilmember Clark, did you have another question? I mean, Mayor Clark, did you have another question?
It's like I haven't been called that in a while.
Didn't mean
Yeah,
to
but
poke you there.
I was behind Holman, so I can wait.
Okay, how about you, Councilmember Holman?
Sorry, I just didn't lower my hand from last
Oh,
time.
okay. Your turn,
Sorry.
Mayor Clark.
It was essentially how we're communicating this to residents, all of these opportunities, since that they are so new. Does the city plan to put out a press release ourselves? Because I don't know. I mean, I assume council didn't get this email that I'll forward from Cox to council right now. But what is our plan to communicate to make sure residents know about these?
We think, honestly, a key role the city of Norman can play in the recognition of what services are readily available is that of communication and guiding people to resources already available. So much has happened just this week in the area of broadband affordability. We see two potential battlefronts: accessibility and affordability. And of course, accessibility, from the looks of the maps, in almost all of Norman, there are 3 providers available to anybody who wants the service. So accessibility is really not a problem that we can identify. Affordability could be a problem. We see some solutions that are now available just as early as this week, and we would love to be able to broadcast that out to the community. And this knowledge is easier for us to find when we work closely with Patrick and his Oklahoma Rural Broadband Expansion Act, and to stay plugged into that group really keeps us on the cutting edge when information is released. So we are now in a position to be able to be a conduit for information and help steer people to resources readily available.
Excellent.
And this may be a dumb follow-up question, but since it's only Cox that's offering it, would someone have to completely change their service provider to have more affordable access?
For the emergency broadband benefit,
Yes.
I don't know for sure if it's only Cox. I think AT&T is at least looking into it. The Lifeline program is available through all providers, I believe, that are in Norman. But yeah, I would think if you want to take advantage of it, you've got to switch to the provider that's discounting them.
I thought that Mr. Gray said the Lifeline was Cox for sure, wasn't sure about OEC or AT&T.
Yeah, the Lifeline program, which is a federal assistance program for low income, has been around for a long time, and we just got approved for that a few months ago. So that's there. The emergency broadband, which is new, is something that we're also looking into. Being relatively new to the space, it took us. This is going through government programs, it took us almost over a year to get approved for Lifeline. We tried to speed it up through the pandemic, going through the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, but the regulation process does not move swiftly. So there's the bigger companies are going to be certainly available to offer these before the smaller companies. And so the fact that Cox is already there is not surprising. I don't know if AT&T is participating or not, because I did see the press release that Cox really announced it. So, and then the other providers will, like I said, we're looking into it. I don't know if it's something we can get done in time for the program to actually be available before it runs out.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mayor Clark?
Okay, so when we talk about municipal broadband in Norman, I've really heard all three of these approaches. When I had my orientation with Councilmember Perry last summer, he said, this is what's going to save the city. It's going to be a moneymaker. I've heard others say, we want to make sure that everyone has internet, free internet maybe. I've heard others say, we want to make sure we fill in the infrastructure gaps. So I think if we're going to move forward with some kind of program, especially with these federal funds, we need some help identifying what our goal is and what do we think that program is going to look like. As a city owned and run enterprise, it would be a separate enterprise fund, just like our utilities would be. It would be subject to voter approval of rates, which is a challenge. And of course, the upfront infrastructure costs are really high, and you're going to have to get a lot of customers in competition with other providers to be able to break even. And so that's something to think about with that. The infrastructure gaps, those maps don't seem to indicate big gaps in accessibility, but we know there are affordability gaps. And so I don't know if this emergency broadband program is going to meet that need completely or not. If it takes a year for companies to be able to get into the program like Lifeline does, it may not. So we really wanted to just sort of open it up for discussion on what direction we should be proceeding with exploring this.
Catherine, you've jarred a question in that we have a pretty good understanding about how much federal money will show up for the city of Norman, estimated about 22.7 out of this first round, and then other infrastructure dollars yet to be determined. Patrick, what is the anticipated budget for OEC to get into this business?
Yeah, it's expensive. Our project, which you kind of saw on the FCC map, kind of, we serve a lot more, but it's going to be probably $175 to $200 million of investment. It's pretty, very, very capital intensive. And then
in terms, so you're not done. So you are in the process of spending somewhere in the range of 175 million to get the infrastructure in place.
Yeah.
How long do you anticipate it to either break even on an annual revenue versus expenditures basis, or I'm assuming there's a plan at some point where you will measure whether or not you've recovered the investment in the fiber itself?
Yes, for those that don't know about OEC, we are a cooperative, so not for profit. We're owned by our customers, so we don't have any specific profit pressures. Nobody's making a lot of money on this, so it does have to cover its cost. And we are anticipating that it will start to be cash flow positive. When we originally did it, it was looked to be year 5 or 6 with a net profit in year 9 or 10. And we're obviously hoping to beat that by trying to build fast and outperform our original model. But it is a pretty scary jump for us to invest that. For example, the 175 to 200 million we're investing, OEC has about 300 million in assets. So it's almost doubling how big we are in a matter of 3 to 5 years. So it's a lot.
And how many employees after not counting the installation, which is a big task on its own, but once all the infrastructure is in, how many employees do you guys envision it to take to manage and maintain a system like this?
We outsource almost all of our construction at the moment. So and we have current employee count of about 30 to 40 on the broadband side. When it's all said and done, I think you can probably count on about an employee every 500 subscribers. So we're looking at 70 or 80. We'll be almost as big. We serve 60,000 electric meters right now, and if we get to 30,000 broadband subscribers, it'll probably be about half that size. So about 60 employees is what we're looking at.
Thank you.
Good for Norman. Good jobs. If you follow us on Facebook, or whatever, there's always job openings. We're growing like crazy.
Councilmember Holman.
Thank you. My goals or concerns to fill have definitely been about affordability and access. It looks like there is some kind of internet access available to everybody in Norman. But my concern has been, is it, reliable? Are they able to could they participate in this meeting right now on Zoom with their home internet if they live somewhere by the lake or whatnot? Can they watch this meeting on YouTube with so much that, not people won't want to watch it because it's buffering so much, that type of thing. And so that's kind of been the angle I've wanted to go, at least in the pursuit of municipal broadband for Norman, is trying to fill in some of those gaps, and especially with the pandemic and people having to rely more on the internet for video and things like that than we've seen before, and kids having to do it for school and all these things, and trying to address any areas where our private providers may not be able to. And some of my questions about it that we might do some research, we might have to follow up at our next meeting perhaps, but I'm wondering about in cities where they do have municipal broadband, how have they done so? Because I know there also is probably private providers in those cities too, or in those areas. So how they have, how they've worked together on that, or how those work together, I guess. And then because I would note too that, like, my home internet, I have Cox, and after my rent, the internet at my house is my second highest monthly bill. And it's more than I make per month being a city council member. And so that, coupled with my cell phone and the internet that I need on my phone, I'm paying right now over $200 a month to have internet home and have internet on my phone. And so that is significant to me. And that's, like I said, just home internet by itself is my second highest bill, but my phone and my internet combined are definitely, they're about twice as much as all my other bills, and so that's a concern that I have, and that I'm hoping to try to address as we pursue this, whatever options that we can do in Norman. But that's kind of my feedback to staff on where the direction I'm trying to get to. Thanks.
I know we've had conversations with Tuttle and Ponca City, two cities where they have tried to do municipal broadband. Patrick, I think it was you that said last week that Tuttle didn't have another provider. Is that right?
Yeah, with Tuttle, which is in our service territory, OEC serves about 2/3 of the households in Tuttle. We are not built into Tuttle because they did do municipal broadband, and they they did have some private providers, but they were grossly underserved, what we consider underserved. When we're on the state level, we've begun to start defining these terms. What's, you saw the state definition of broadband at 150K, which is very, very outdated. So we're bringing that up to speed to match the federal one, but we're also looking to definitions of underserved and unserved. And Tuttle, when you talk to their city manager, when they looked at, they tried to get people to come in to serve. We were not in the business yet, or else it would have been a great partnership for us. And so they just did not feel they had reliable options to even get 10 megabits per second, much less 25 or 100. So you can see they're offering 100 megabits up and down and a gig up and down to all their citizens. And I don't know that they really wanted to be in the business, but they just didn't feel like, and putting words in their mouth, but they didn't feel like anybody was there. So very different case than Norman, certainly, especially now that, the OEC fiber is out there in the, by the lake, and I would consider the rural members, which, are members. So I don't know anything about Ponca City. We haven't talked to them, but talked a lot with Tuttle, and I think that's what they'd say.
My recollection about Ponca City is theirs is downtown based only, and Tim might jump in here. I know he talked to their IT guys.
Yeah, I spoke with them. It is similar to Tuttle. They're kind of isolated out there. They're not around a big, massive metropolitan area. So very similar. They're having issues with other providers wanting to move into the area, and so they kind of started up their own bit of broadband. And I believe, and Patrick may know a little bit more about this too, with OEC Electric being out that way in Tuttle, that a lot of times, and what OEC has done to eliminate a large portion of the build out cost is they follow their own infrastructure. They've followed their electrical infrastructure in the rural areas. And I suppose even up into the urban areas, but that takes away a big amount of the cost when you already have an infrastructure built. And that's something like if the city had to begin to move into various areas, we have a fiber loop, but it's kind of going along where you've got stoplights and things like that. If you were to get into some of the neighborhoods, it would be really costly. That's where a lot of the cost would come from.
Yeah, it is accurate. I wouldn't say that it cuts down the cost so much, because it just, the fiber cost what it costs. But, in the rural areas, we already have poles and wire out there. So we already have a big investment out there. As to your point, most of the stuff that we have in subdivisions is all underground. And so it would be very similar, and that's very expensive. Once you do that, which kind of like the water system, you put in a lot of underground lines in existing areas. And that's what we're doing right now. And so very, very similar.
Councilmember Holman.
Yeah, in Ponca City, is it a situation where the downtown area just has a free public Wi-Fi that anybody can hook up to, or is it one where the businesses or people interested, pay the city a monthly bill for? Do we know?
I think they are charging customers. They have, I think, some free areas, but it's been a while since I talked to their city attorney, who's now since retired, but I believe I think they're charging customers because he was telling me they're not breaking even at the point that I had talked to him about it.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to see if it was like just a hotspot type situation, but that sounds like what it would be like if we were using our fiber. We'd have Wi-Fi hotspots around intersections and things like that. But like you were saying, once you get into the neighborhood, we'd have to have additional infrastructure if we were going to try to provide broadband to the neighborhoods. So, okay, thanks for that info.
Yeah, and just really quick, I took a fast browse of their website, and they have 3 tiers of charge that they do. So they're looking to, their gig plan is really expensive. It's $250 a month, but the looks like they have a 50 megabits per second and a 100 for $60 and $100. So they're charging for that stuff.
I found an email from their city attorney. They built it in 5. They're building it in 5 phases. So the first phase was the center of town because it was compact and they didn't have rock to go through, which is apparently a problem out there. And then they're going, southeast, northwest, northeast, southeast, getting progressively harder in the build, so more expensive. They did a test site with 20 to 40 customers in the center zone, using city staff primarily to see how it would work. And then that they're continuing to, it was 100% subsidized to get through phase one. And then as they build out the future phases, they will start charging customers. It's not self-supporting at this point, but they are running it as a public utility through their trust. So he said they were having the same problem, that providers up there would want to cherry pick the high volume businesses. They didn't want to provide internet from city limit to city limit, and so they felt they had to step in.
So is there anybody else in Oklahoma that's pursuing this that we're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
And the other thing that I wanted to ask that we've kind of skipped over, but when we mentioned about the federal, the emergency benefit that we're just been made aware of, was there an end? It seemed like that was only going to be a benefit through the pandemic.
It's 6 months past the end of the pandemic. I think it's determined by the CDC.
Okay. And do we have any idea how the CDC is determining the end of the pandemic?
No, I haven't looked at that yet, but I can. I'm not sure what their trigger is going to be, but.
Okay. You know, I guess as far as my thoughts on it so far, I was able to have, you know, conversations with Councilmember Perry at the time, and it was certainly something that he ran on, and there was a lot of interest from the people in his ward. So I think I share similar thoughts as Councilmember Holman. You know, we can say that we have the accessibility and affordability. We can say that we have the accessibility, but I am really interested in understanding what that actually means, because I think one of the things that we really learned through the pandemic is how important it is to be able to be connected virtually, and just having the minimum amount of service is not really going to cut it anymore. And one of the comments that you made, Patrick, is just the work that seems to be going on with your committee of actually defining what some of these terms mean now in our post-pandemic era, because it sounds like some things are really out of date, and what might have been formerly an acceptable speed is really not accessibility, you know, anymore. So I'm interested in understanding more about that, and also very interested in filling the gaps. And so what if you could just remind me, because I think we've actually talked about this before, the city of Norman has fiber laid, and there's where are the gaps between what OEC is doing within the city limits and what is available through the city, and how do those match up?
Well, Tim can fill us in. The city's fiber is pretty darn limited. It just goes in a loop. We are, 96% unconnectable to where people need internet access from the city. When the city's loop was built, it was built with the capacity that our IT people identified that we needed to connect city facilities. We didn't build a lot of extra capacity to provide fiber pairs for other uses. So we don't have a lot of dark fiber laying around waiting for another user to come by and get. And when you think about how fiber gets distributed, Patrick described the thing to us where they already have an electric meter going to every house, and it's easy for them to take fiber to the house where they already have a meter. Our fiber pretty much lives in the middle of the road, and we only branch off to get to a city building. So there's just so much of our city infrastructure that's not really able to be accessed by anybody. Tim, can you describe it? Is there a way to measure it in terms of capacity that could be used for other purposes in the fiber we've already got in the ground?
Well, I mean, I've got a couple of comments along those lines. Most of the fiber that we've laid in the beginning began with partnerships with ODOT. And Sean's presented some things in the past showing basically our fiber map around the city. And we partnered with them, and ODOT has agreements that says, you know, we can't use that fiber commercially. There's just regulations against it. Now, all of our fiber isn't like that, but a lot of it is. The other bits of our fiber infrastructure, if you can just think about the main thoroughfares through Norman. So think about, you know, Robinson, Lindsay, Main Street. We're picking up the majority of the street lights along there so that those, we have physical connections to each street light so that the traffic division has remote access to all of the street light controllers, and they can make changes and, you know, monitor things from their desk basically remotely. And then we rode along those same areas to pick up all of our outlying buildings. So fire stations, rec centers, just basically like the Norman Investigation Center on Lindsay Street, places like that, so that we've got a full network. And then we've created loops over time so that we can, like Daryl was saying earlier, if we do experience some sort of a break, it doesn't interrupt our network for providing public safety and things like that that's riding off of that. So when we talk about joining forces with someone, there's some areas that do have dark fiber, but there's not a ton of that. Like I said, I think that the build out, and if you kind of recall what Patrick was saying earlier, that's one of the biggest barriers to us doing this. The build out cost is very, very expensive. And then when you talk about accessibility as far as what's available to us, if you look at the map that from the FCC, 25 megabits download speeds related back to the thing that Catherine showed earlier, you can watch 4K video on a 25 megabit speed, and there's 100% coverage of at least 3 service providers in the entire Cleveland County. So as far as ability for customers to get that kind of speed, it's there. It comes down to the cost, which Councilmember Holman described, which, you know, and that we understand too. But I think really that's the biggest barrier that we're talking about, is people being able to afford high-speed broadband. And they would have to, you know, at this point, use something like these rescue plans,
which are time limited.
Correct. And we think of the federal dollars coming to us as one-time money. So if there is a mechanism that Patrick and his committee that he sits on can figure out a way how to turn a one-time investment into ongoing affordability programs, we could use one-time money and buy down everybody's bill for a period of time. And then when our money's gone, their bill goes back up and we're right back where we started from. So if there's an investment to make that always keeps the price down, that would be a solution. Otherwise, we're going to give somebody a breath of air and then we're going to take it away from them again.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. Any other comments or questions?
Does somebody have a map of the city's fiber and where the dark fiber lays that we could get a copy of?
We do, Council. We're happy to share that with you. Candidly, we'd really like that not to be out there among the everywhere. It's a critical information system that serves all of our 911 systems and so on. So we'd rather not invite folks to do harm to it. That's why we try to not advertise that sort of thing. But happy to share that with you. We've shared it in a recent presentation to council. And I think that's maybe where this whole dialogue began with Councilor Gehrman after she saw the map of our fiber network.
As Mr. O'Leary highlights, when we watch in the news and hackers, they hack a pipeline, which fascinates me to think how that may work. But when we recognize that fiber controls streetlights and things like that, the opportunity for somebody to attempt to interfere with those regular municipal operations, that's the risk. So yes, as long as we don't make those, widely available and published all over town, we think our infrastructure will remain secure.
Yeah, if you'll just send me that PowerPoint from last time, that'd be great, Sean.
You bet.
And while I'm thinking of it, if you could also send the PowerPoint from today to all of us, that would be highly useful. I'd like to look at that again. The other question I had was with the fiber that we do have installed, it's my understanding that there's, different sections that were funded by different federal dollars. Is that correct? And then
That's correct, Councilor Wright. Tim did a good job explaining that. The origin of this really is the traffic signal system and our federal transportation grant dollars. We were doing that for a few years before we literally were sitting down with our IT folks and said, hey, we're starting to get everywhere. Do you want to start sharing some of this conduit and create a city fiber network for communication purposes? So it was always a traffic signal interconnection system from the beginning that has then been created into a network. And as Tim mentioned, the city and IT and council have then allocated capital funds to do other extensions of that where it didn't make sense to do traffic signal connection.
okay, so are there different kinds of restrictions on different portions of the fiber as far as how we use it, or if we could use it in a commercial way?
Yeah, Catherine's probably a better source than I, but we have tried to evaluate those contracts that we had with the Federal Highway Administration and ODOT effectively. And there was no allowance for commercial use of that conduit or that fiber that we used for transportation purposes. But she's probably a much better source than I am to try to understand the legalities of that.
Right. And unfortunately, those contracts are fairly standardized. So I think regardless of the funding source, if it's federal funding, we're going to find those provisions because they aren't giving us this money as an economic development project for us to go then make money off of. It's really for a very specific and limited purpose. Oh, you're muted.
If, I'm just thinking about, so you mentioned that it would have to be an enterprise fund. I mean, we would set it up as an enterprise fund.
Yeah.
That's not really a for-profit entity either.
Right.
Right. Okay. So, when Patrick, when you talked about OEC and the model for OEC being a cooperative, so how can we think about it in those kinds of terms of how, if there's a possibility for some kind of partnership or collaboration, what are the possibilities there?
From our point of view, the happy to partner if there are, we've talked a little bit about, if there's areas that aren't being served. We've, as we built out to OEC members, we actually end up serving a lot of people out, especially out near the lake that are on OG&E just because they were underserved out there. And that's kind of at our heart of what we're doing. And so the FCC map you saw, it's from June of 2020. Those federal stuff can take a while to get there by the time it goes through all the processes. So we've built out considerably more. But if there's areas that aren't being served, we we may have already identified those and brought service to them. And if not, we certainly look at it. And if it's something that it doesn't make sense for us to do on our own, some sort of partnership we're certainly open towards. So, like I said, it's the same type of model, right? We're providing service to our members. The city provides service to its citizens. It could be, if there's a need out there, then we can probably figure it out.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Clark.
Thank you. I have concerns about creating a utility because this seems like something that, since we have to vote on it, I don't know if we'd get the support to pass it. If you want to be brutally honest, I think some people are doing fine with what we've got, since access is not an issue for some people. So I don't know if it could pass. So I'm trying to get creative. I like what Daryl said about, I don't want to give them a breath of air with short-term access and then take it away. So, but if, I don't know, I love the idea of scholarship, immediate assistance to help people get back on their feet in the meantime. I mean, that's something, but I don't know. I don't know if I support a full utility just because of my concerns about it passing, frankly. So.
Okay. Any other comment? So Councilmember Studley or Mayor Clark, any other things that you might want to add about, what your primary concerns are and how to move forward?
Yeah, I'm curious about the American Relief Act money, how we would use that, if that is something that we could use to help kind of assist in this process, and how we could get that out maybe to the public for transparency as well, to see if that's something that they are interested in doing. And get some public input from that in the future. So is that something that we can talk about in a future oversight meeting, or how does that work? What does that look like?
Yeah, we can certainly talk about it in a future oversight committee meeting. This interim rule that came out a couple of days ago doesn't provide a tremendous amount of detail, but it does give you some idea of where Treasury thinks the authorized expenditures should occur. And so it's unserved or underserved areas. And they define that as that 25 megabits per second speed. So it's hard for us to look at that map and say we have unserved areas. Gotcha. Based on the capabilities. But I'm happy to look into this. I've been reading this rule all week, but I want to look into it more and see if maybe there's a way to work on that affordability piece in addition to the underserved and unserved piece.
Okay. Clark.
Well, I know Holman has, I'll just throw out real quick. I'm pretty sure the school gets a bunch of money to help with access as well in terms of hotspots and everything. So before we move forward any further, I would like to see how we could collaborate with them and make sure, again, we're not just throwing money at things that don't actually solve problems. And I know that I like Councilmember Holman's point about in the farthest reaches of Ward 5, can they actually participate in a council meeting if it's on YouTube? So if it is weak access, I feel like maybe the 25 megabits it's clearly not the bare minimum. Probably better. Is there a way we could beef up existing stuff with this money? And that could be a one-time use just to kind of, make it better, and then they are on their own. I mean, that would be my question as well. How do we collaborate with the resources that are already out?
Yeah. Councilmember Holman.
Yeah, I do share the same concerns that Mayor Clark has about a utility, since it would require a vote of the entire city, which would largely be people that don't need help or need help with internet service. And so getting them to vote for this and pay a monthly because the way I understand it, it would have to be a service we provide whether you use it or not, just like recycling is. Maybe not, but I think Catherine has something there.
Yeah, I don't think we would have to set it up that way necessarily.
Okay. That was a big concern of mine, is that if it's something we have to get buy-in from like a whole section of the city and, rely on people to pay for a service they don't need or want, that would be problematic given our utility rate and voting setup. But I am definitely interested in any kind of partnership or using any type of city funds through the federal government or whatever it may be to help offset the cost for low-income residents, to have some sort of minimum. I don't know what the minimum threshold is. I think what Patrick was saying was that, if I understood that right, that 25 was good enough to be able to watch this meeting on YouTube and good enough to participate through Zoom. But maybe clarify what that minimum threshold would be. What does it take for somebody in the most rural part of Norman to be able to not only watch this meeting on YouTube, but if they wanted to, if we needed them to participate in this Zoom meeting and they lived out there, and whatever the minimum threshold would be as far as internet or broadband width to be able to participate without it buffering and all that stuff. If there's a way we can, some sort of partnership where we're helping with the cost, that one-time infrastructure to help with that maybe. But along those lines is kind of what I'm definitely thinking, is how we can help. Maybe we're not providing a whole new service, but we're helping our existing service providers help those people in our community that can't afford the high tier, or if it's not available, they've got something, and it may be the minimum that the state and FCC says, but maybe that's not the standard that we need. And so helping to boost up the infrastructure to address those type of needs. So I agree, kind of a targeted way at doing this instead of trying to cover the entire city when it already is covered, but that the speed and affordability are definitely the main issues that I hope to address with whatever we do. So I unfortunately have to take off right now, but I really appreciate the discussion, and I definitely look forward to our follow-up on this one. Thank you, and congratulations, Lee, on your first committee meeting chair.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate your comments. Patrick, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of answer Councilman Holman's question and Mayor Clark's question on the speed. Just something about the FCC map, that is advertised speed. And so if you provide that speed in any part of that census block, it is considered covered for the FCC. At our state level, which I'll put a link up as well, we're trying to develop a statewide broadband map that takes into account better data so we can actually see where the underserved areas are. It's focused on rural, but as we found out in Norman, you can have unserved areas everywhere, just a full pocket. So we are working on that. I just saw the governor's press release of a budget. I'm hoping there's some money allocated. I think there's supposed to be some allocation of money to create that broadband map. So very soon we should have some really good data to try to identify what areas are underserved and where the speeds don't serve. Councilmember Holman, you asked about speeds. True 25.3 will work if it's actually being delivered, and that's one of the flaws of the FCC process, and they're speeding that up. And there's also discussion at the FCC level and at the state level that it's really probably 1,000 megabits per second down and 10 megabits per second up. That's true broadband today. Obviously all the government entities defining broadband are going to be behind the times a little bit, just because they follow things. So your point is, you're right on the money on what's truly needed. And so we should have some tools, because that's at the state level. That was our first challenge, is that if we're going to try to serve unserved areas, how do we identify them? How do we truly know before we start investing dollars at the state level, or even matching federal dollars to take care of it?
Thank you. Councilmember Studley.
Okay, so I'm just trying to wrap my brain around this. So our options that we're kind of looking at is we're talking about, we could have a utility, but that would be ran by the city of Norman, or we have a company like OEC that already provides these services. And if I, as a consumer, choose to go with OEC, then we could have, and is this what maybe Stephen Tyler Holman was talking about, was we would help right now with some of the initial infrastructure costs to help get the internet to people. But like her map already showed, that's already there, but maybe just not for OEC's fiber. So if we're working with OEC to provide this service to people in our community, and they're willing to say, for income level X, Y, and Z, we're going to offer free or very low cost, and then, you know, kind of tear it out how the other cities have done. Is that something, am I along the right lines there? Like those are kind of our options, either a city utility or partnering with someone like OEC to reduce the cost for the consumer?
Those are both options, and the ability to buy down the price of service for people who may income qualify will be limited by the duration of, you know, how long our money lasts. So you can buy it down for a while, but when we run out of money, the price goes back up to whatever market conditions.
Unless we can work out some kind of deal with OEC, right? Or is
yeah,
that?
and if there is an investment that would result in the price being lower, that's an investment we could most likely make given the federal guidelines.
So is that something, Patrick, that you're able to talk on, or can you find out more about that? What that would look like?
You bet. That's certainly something we can look at. Obviously the devil's in the details on that. The infrastructure is the biggest cost when it comes to those things. So it's we can certainly look at that. The challenge is going to be once again on the affordability side, is that if there are already accessible options there, as building in that area, when Catherine showed that where OEC is, we're not in, we're mainly in the rural areas of Norman, or what was rural 50 years ago. And so, can't get everywhere, certainly. And obviously like downtown, stuff like that, we're just far away. So be limited by stuff like that. But we're certainly open to partner or be part of an RFP process. I'm assuming there's some sort of city, couldn't just come with us and without opening it up and doing bids and all that stuff. But we'd be open for all of that.
Okay. Did you have any other comment, Councilmember Studley? Okay. So I think, what I'm hearing is that we asked if we have amazing opportunity really to have money available from the American Rescue Plan to use for infrastructure types of investments in broadband to increase, fill in the gaps, I guess I would say, and also address the accessibility and the affordability issues. And I'm interested in, I'm not sure we have enough information today, but I'm interested in understanding the accessible part, even though we say we have it, what does that really mean going forward? And also learning a little bit more about what is happening with the Norman Public Schools and how they're able to meet the needs of our school children across Norman. So does that give you enough direction? So
that will allow us to prepare for the next conversation after additional homework has been compiled.
Great. And do we need to bring that back to oversight?
Probably best to bring it back to oversight before any specific directions taken to council or otherwise.
Okay, great. Well, Mayor Clark, it's 5:07. So I'm a little over, but we did start a little bit late. So I'm going to say we kept it to about an hour. If there are no other questions or comments, I want to thank the staff for all of the information and the PowerPoint that you prepared. I'd also like to thank Mr. Grace for being part of our conversation today and hope that we can continue that conversation at our next meeting. Unless anyone has any other comments, and I don't see any, this meeting is adjourned.
Well done, Chairwoman.
Still standing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.